Welcome to Actual Scale Modelling. This is part 6 of Revell's Space Shuttle and 747. In part 5 I made up the fuselage and wings. In this part I'm going to be going on to completing the build, so that's putting everything together. So let's jump onto this and see how well I get on. To begin with, I'm placing the engines onto the wings. Now each engine has its own little recess point for them to fit. They fit in quite nicely. They're quite snug fitting, so I didn't have any problems getting these attached. Each wing had 2 engines, obviously, and they really did require the minimum effort to attach them. Now I can start work on the stand. So I'm painting this in Revell Aquacolor 06 tab black, and this is going to be for the base and the stem for the stand as well. This is going to need roughly about 2 coats before I'm happy with it. I'm using Revell Aquacolor 76 light grey, and this is for the covers of the landing gear base. Once they were dry, I was able to start putting them in position. These are a little bit tricky to place in. It's just because A, the size of them, and 2, they're in each side. It's not a solid unit. So it takes a little bit of manoeuvring just to get them in position. And it's the same again on the middle section for the landing gear base. These once more are in various different parts. But when I was putting these in, I noticed I had a small problem. The compartment that I placed in before buttoning up the fuselage had actually moved, or I put it in the wrong place, but I think it actually moved. The middle section is meant to sit flush with the fuselage, and mine didn't. So I'm pretty sure that this is my mistake and not the kit's fault. So you can see here the middle area, but it should be sitting flush, is actually gone inside. So all I've done was cut a piece of plastic card to the shape and placed it in. It's a simple fix. There's no drama really, apart from me making the mistake and having to fix it. Once it was in place, I then just filled up any little gaps with a bit of filler, which I'm sure I would have had to do anyway on some of these covers. They didn't quite fit the fuselage where it did sit flush. So the only extra time added on to the build was the little bit of plastic card that I had to cut. I left this to dry for quite some time before I took my rough file and started filing everything down to a flat finish. As you can see, there was quite a lot of filing to be done in the end to get this all smooth. So that took a little bit of time also, but once it's done, it is worth the effort doing. And once I've finished polishing it up with my smooth piece of sanding paper, it'll be time to repaint. However, because I've been handling it quite a lot, I managed to chip the decal at the front. Now, this is one of the dangers of decaling before the model is finished. You can destroy your decal. Even though I did varnishes after placing them on to protect them, I must have just scraped the nose against my bench or something and took off the decal. Now, it is a very simple fix to sort out. So then I'm using Revell Aquacolor 350 or the Fanzai Blue to paint in the missing parts. Now this is almost an exact colour of the decal, so I don't have to worry about different tones or it looking a bit strange. And I've noticed this on past builds when I've had to do this. If I'm using the company's paint range, there's a very good chance that the paint in the range is going to match the decal colour once you find the proper shade. It's just a theory, but that's what seems to happen when I have to make repairs like that. So anyway, now I'm on to the rear wings, and I've just made up the first stabiliser unit, and that then gets placed on the edge or the tip of the rear wing. And while those are drying, I'm going to make up the stem for the stand. The 2 halves go together quite easily. There's some location points just to guide you in. I did have to use a couple of clamps though, just to make sure that everything sits properly. And now the stabilizers are dry, I'm placing in the support brackets. I'm placing one end on the stabilizer itself first of all, and once that's in position, I will just gently push it down onto the actual wing. Now there is a location point on the stabilizer wing, but none on the actual wing itself, hence why I'm doing it this way. Now it's back to the main wings and it's time to place them on. These just slide on, there was no modifications needed whatsoever. It is a tight fit, but that means I'm not holding it for ages trying to get these to stay in position. So a simple pushing and a tiny little bit of wiggle just to make sure everything is straight, and then that's it. I did manage to get a little bit of cement on my finger and I had to wipe that off, and I will repaint that slightly as well when the time comes. But as it stands, the wings went on without any problems. And it was the same for the rear wings also. The rear wing locations, there's a different slot at the back, let's say, for them to push into, so that you can't get mixed up on which wing goes where. Because they're very similar, it's quite easy to get the wings the wrong way around. So make sure that you know exactly the positioning of the wings and what side of the wing is meant to be on what side of the aircraft. And once the wings were dried and in position, it was time to put in the remainder covers. These ones go from the wing and butt onto the fuselage. Like the other ones, they were a bit fiddly to put on just because of the shape of them, but they did go on quite well in the end. Just a little bit of manoeuvring. And then I was able to repaint with using Revell Aquacolor 76 light grey. This I'll need a couple of quotes because I'm not priming this. It's one of the downsides about painting before you build everything as well. If you go priming it, you would have to lose all your paint work. However, if you put a thin coat on, that will act as a primer. Just let it dry thoroughly before you put the next coat on. But that goes to say with any painting anyway. Always put on thin coats, let them dry 100% before applying your next coat. Now it's time to place on the windscreen or canopy, and I'm using micro crystal clear here to attach the canopy. This stuff goes on and it doesn't leave any fumes, so it will not fog up your clear part. I only needed a tiny amount of this stuff for it to attach. You don't need a lot. The downside is it is a lot longer drying time than normal cement. But normal cement, you have to be very careful when you're adding it to clear parts because it can cause fumes which will fog the canopy. If you've only got clear normal cement at hand and you don't have any of this stuff, either use a PVA glue as a fallback, or if you've only got the model cement, just put minuscule amounts on the area that you're bonding, then leave it for a good 30 seconds to a minute to let those fumes dissipate before attaching the part. That way you will minimize the chances of the area fogging up. And then it's back to the stand, and I'm just doing a little bit of light sanding on the seams. There was a little ridged area that I didn't like, so I'm just smoothing that down. There's a nice recess area for the stem of the stand to fit in. It's deep enough that it's going to take the stem in such a way, adding a lot of weight onto it will not cause it to bend. Obviously it's designed like that because the aircraft and shuttle is going to be quite heavy to go on a stand like this. So once everything is on, I'm just giving it another extra coat of black to tidy everything up. Where the stand connects with the fuselage, there's this stabilizing piece that goes on. On the underside of this, I painted it light grey, the same as the undercarriage of the 747. And now it's time to put on the last coat of varnish, and I'm using Winsor & Newton gloss varnish here, and I'll be placing this all over the 747, and once the varnish is dried, it'll be time to place the shuttle on top of the 747 before placing it on its stand. And this will bring the build to an end, so the next part 7, will be the final reveal. So if you haven't done so already, why don't you check out the channel for the rest of my builds. If you subscribe to the channel, make sure you hit that notification bell. That way you'll be kept up to date not only with this build, but all my future builds, of course. Hit that like button. Don't be afraid to leave a comment. And of course you can share the video. But for now, thank you all very much for watching. Bye bye.